The distress beacon cut through the void like a dying scream, its signal weak and fragmented, as Admiral Kithane watched the tactical display with mounting dread. The bridge of the Hegemony command vessel Dominion's Edge fell silent as the scanner, readings resolved into impossible clarity. A single Velthari destroyer, the Sovereign's Wrath, limping through space with hull breaches bleeding atmosphere into the cosmic dark. It was the sole survivor of Battlefleet Terminus, 237 warships that had pursued one human captain into the contested Nexus Sector 3 months ago. "Bring them aboard," Kithane ordered, his forearms trembling slightly as he adjusted his ceremonial war cloak. The Velthari were the Hegemony's finest warriors, their battle lust legendary across 17 star systems. That only one vessel returned spoke of carnage beyond comprehension. Captain Vorthak was carried from the docking bay on a medical gurney, his chitinous exoskeleton cracked and leaking ichor. The proud warrior's mandibles clicked weakly as his compound eyes struggled to focus on Kithane's towering form. "Admiral," Vorthak wheezed through his translator, "the human Captain Mordecai ran. He was not what we expected." Kithane leaned closer, his own translator humming. "Tell me what happened to my fleet, Captain." Vorthak's breathing apparatus cycled rapidly, the memory clearly causing distress. "We cornered him at the Shattered Crown Nebula. His ship, the Terra's Defiance, was alone, a single heavy cruiser against our armada. We thought it would be a simple execution." The dying captain's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He broadcast on all frequencies just before we opened fire, said something that chilled my warrior's heart. "You want to see what happens when you back a human into a corner? Let me show you why Earth stopped asking for help." Admiral Kithane felt his secondary hearts skip a beat. The humans were supposed to be a minor species, barely worth the Hegemony's attention beyond their useful trade routes and mining colonies. They had been pushed to the edge of their own space, their requests for alliance status repeatedly denied, their diplomatic overtures dismissed with contempt. "The battle began at 1430 ship time," Vorthak continued, his voice growing stronger as combat memories flooded back. "We deployed in a standard encirclement formation, 12 battle groups, each with a dreadnought as flagship. The human ship was magnificent, I'll grant that much. Sleek lines, experimental drives that left prismatic trails in space. But it was still just one ship." The Velthari captain paused, his breathing growing labored. "Ran didn't run. He didn't even try to negotiate. Instead, he did something I've never seen in 40 years of warfare. He charged directly into the center of our formation, alone." Kithane's tactical mind reeled. It was suicide, pure and simple. Even the most advanced human vessel couldn't hope to survive concentrated fire from 200 ships. "What happened next?" he demanded. Vorthak's compound eyes seemed to focus on something far beyond the medical bay walls. "He turned his ship into a weapon, Admiral. Not just the guns and missiles, the entire vessel became an instrument of destruction. He used our own tactics against us, our formations, our protocols. It was like he knew exactly how we would respond to every maneuver." The captain's voice grew distant, almost reverent. "And then we learned why humans call their ships by names instead of numbers. The Terra's Defiance wasn't just a machine to Captain Ran. It was a living extension of his will, his rage, his absolute refusal to yield." Admiral Kithane reviewed the sensor logs from the Sovereign's Wrath with growing unease. The tactical recordings painted a picture that defied conventional military doctrine. Yet the evidence was undeniable, scattered across 40 cubic parsecs of space in the form of debris fields that had once been the pride of the Hegemonies. "War machine, show me the initial engagement," he ordered his tactical officer, Commander Jektal. The holographic display materialized above the bridge, reconstructing the battle from multiple ship perspectives. The Terra's Defiance appeared as a brilliant silver dart against the star field, its hull gleaming with an almost organic fluidity. Captain Mordecai Ran's voice echoed through the bridge speakers, calm and measured despite facing impossible. "Hegemony fleet, you've come a long way to die. I want you to remember something while you burn. Earth remembers every colony you've glassed. every trade ship you've pirated, every diplomat you've spaced. Today, we stop asking nicely. Kythane watched as the human vessel accelerated toward the hegemony formation at speeds that should have liquefied any organic crew. The first battle group opened fire, energy beams and plasma torpedoes converging on a single point in space where the human ship should have been obliterated. Instead, the Terra's defiance danced. There was no other word for it. The ship moved through the barrage like liquid mercury, each evasive maneuver flowing seamlessly into an attack run. Rand's vessel didn't just dodge the incoming fire. It used the weapon's trajectories to plot intercept courses, turning the hegemony's own volleys into navigational aids. Impossible, breathed Commander Jektal. The G-forces alone should have killed him, but Kythane was beginning to understand. Run a profile analysis on the human ship's construction. Focus on the internal architecture. The scan results made his blood run cold. The Terra's Defiance wasn't built like other vessels. Its interior was a maze of rotating sections, inertial dampeners that could be selectively disabled, and gravitational fields that could be manipulated in real time. The ship itself was designed to handle extreme maneuvers that would cripple conventional designs. He's not just a pilot, Kythane realized. He's adapted himself and his ship to fight in ways we never considered. The holographic battle continued, showing the human vessel's first kill. Instead of engaging the hegemony ships at range, Rand closed to knife-fighting distance, his cruiser sliding between two destroyers like a blade between ribs. The Terra's Defiance fired its main guns at point-blank range, the energy discharge, passing through both enemy vessels and leaving them as expanding clouds of superheated gas. He's using our formation density against us, observed Jektal. We can't fire without hitting our own ships. But that was only the beginning. As the battle progressed, Captain Rand demonstrated an understanding of hegemony tactics that bordered on prescient. He knew exactly how each species in the Alliance would respond to specific threats, exploiting cultural and biological tendencies with surgical precision. When the Velthari battle group attempted to ram his ship, their traditional response to close-quarters combat, Rand used their own momentum to slingshot around a cluster of friendly vessels, causing a devastating collision that took out 6 ships in a single maneuver. When the methodical Zephyrian dreadnoughts tried to box him in with overlapping fire patterns, he exploited their rigid adherence to protocol by creating false sensor readings that caused them to target empty space while he struck from their blind spots. This human studied us, Kythane said, his voice tight with reluctant admiration. Not just our ships and weapons, but our psychology, our instincts, our weaknesses. He turned our own nature into his greatest weapon. The recording showed the battle's crescendo, Captain Rand diving his ship directly into the formation's core, where 3 battle groups converged around the command vessel. The Terra's Defiance spiraled through the concentrated firepower like a needle through fabric, its experimental shields flickering but holding as it reached the flagship. What happened next would haunt Kythane's dreams. Instead of attempting to destroy the massive dreadnought, Rand used his ship's superior maneuverability to tear through its escort screen, crippling engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, the formation's command structure collapsed into chaos as ships lost coordination and began firing blindly into the melee. The human captain's laughter echoed across all frequencies as the hegemony fleet destroyed itself in confusion and friendly fire. The tactical analysis continued for hours, each revelation more disturbing than the last. Admiral Kythane found himself studying not just a battle, but a masterclass in asymmetric warfare that redefined his understanding of human capability. "Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Felnari, "we've decoded additional transmissions from the battle." Captain Rand was broadcasting on multiple channels throughout the engagement, not just to our forces, but to someone else. The communication logs revealed the truth that chilled Kythane to his core. Rand hadn't been fighting alone. Every maneuver, every tactical decision had been transmitted in real time to a destination deep in human space. The battle wasn't just a desperate last stand, it was a live demonstration. He was teaching them, Kythane realized with growing horror. Every mistake we made, every weakness he exploited, he was showing other humans how to kill us. Commander Jektal manipulated the holographic display, focusing on the battle's middle phase. Look at this sequence, Admiral. The human vessel takes what appears to be critical damage. Multiple hull breaches, failing shields, reduced power. Our forces moved in for the kill. The display showed a dozen hegemony cruisers closing on the seemingly crippled Terra's Defiance, their crews no doubt eager to claim the honor of destroying the human captain. It should have been the battle's end. Instead, it became its turning. Beneath the damage to Ran's ship proved to be an elaborate deception. As the hegemony vessels closed range, the Terra's Defiance suddenly blazed back to full power, its apparently crippled systems revealing themselves as deliberately shut down to create a false vulnerability. The human captain had baited an entire battle group into a carefully orchestrated trap. Brilliant, Kythane admitted grudgingly. He used our own warrior culture against us. We couldn't resist the chance to claim personal glory. The ambush was devastating. Ran's ship erupted from its feigned death throes like a predator pouncing on prey, its weapons systems operating at 150% capacity, far beyond what should have been possible. The concentrated fire from the Terra's Defiance carved through the approaching vessels like a blade through paper, each shot precisely calculated to trigger catastrophic secondary explosions. How did he manage such power output? Demanded Jektal. Felnari consulted her instruments. Our analysis suggests he was deliberately overloading his ship's systems, pushing everything beyond safe parameters. The human was willing to destroy his own vessel if it meant taking more of us with him. The battle recording showed the terrible truth of that assessment. As the engagement progressed, the Terra's Defiance began to suffer genuine damage from its own pushed systems. Hull plating glowed cherry red from overheated conduits, and atmosphere vented from stress fractures in the superstructure. Yet Ran continued to fight with undiminished ferocity. "He's killing himself to kill us," observed Jektal with something approaching awe. But even self-destruction became a weapon in the human captain's hands. As his ship began to come apart, Ran used the failing systems to create devastating improvisations. Overloaded plasma conduits became makeshift bombs, ejected from the ship to detonate among hegemony formations. Venting atmosphere became concealment, creating vast clouds of freezing gas that disrupted sensors and targeting systems. The most horrifying moment came when the Terra's Defiance lost its primary engines. Rather than surrender or attempt to withdraw, Captain Ran used the ship's emergency thrusters to ram a Velthari battlecruiser, the impact cracking both vessels' hulls and sending them tumbling through space locked in a deadly embrace. Status: report from that engagement? Kythane asked, though he dreaded the answer. The human ship separated at the last moment, Felnari reported. Captain Ran used explosive bolts to jettison his engine section just before impact. The battlecruiser was destroyed, but the Terra's Defiance survived barely. The recording showed Ran's crippled vessel, now little more than a command section and forward weaponry, continuing to fight with the relentless determination of a wounded predator. His tactics became even more brutal and innovative, using debris from destroyed ships as improvised projectiles, and exploiting the confusion of battle to strike from unexpected angles. This human redefined the concept of acceptable losses, Kythane concluded. He was willing to sacrifice everything, his ship, his life, his crew, to inflict maximum damage on our forces. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. Analysis of the battle's final phase revealed that Captain Ran had been in communication with his home fleet throughout the engagement, transmitting not just tactical data but something far more dangerous: inspiration. Every act of defiance, every impossible maneuver, every moment where a single human ship made the mighty hegemony fleet look like amateurs, it was all being broadcast across human space in real time, turning Captain Mordecai Ran into a symbol of resistance that would outlive the battle itself. The Medical bay aboard the Sovereign's Wrath revealed horrors that standard hegemony military doctrine had never prepared Captain Vorthek to witness. Admiral Kythane toured the facility with growing dread, observing the survivors, if they could be called that, of humanity's lesson in warfare. The psychological trauma is unlike anything in our medical databases, reported Chief Medical Officer Zithara, her tentacles writhing with distress. These warriors have seen their fundamental understanding of combat completely shattered. Kythane examined the catatonic form of Wing Commander Thistle, once the pride of the Velthari fighter Corps. The veteran pilot's compound eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, his mandibles occasionally clicking in what the medical staff had identified as repetitive patterns. "He keeps saying the same phrase," Scythera explained. "In perfect human standard. Terra remembers, Terra remembers. We believe it was something Captain Rand broadcast during the fighter engagement." The Admiral reviewed that particular battle sequence with morbid fascination. The hegemony had deployed over 300 fighter craft against the lone human vessel, assuming that even the Terra's Defiance couldn't target so many small, fast-moving opponents simultaneously. They had been catastrophically wrong. "Captain, Rand's ship had transformed again, its hull sections rearranging to reveal dozens of point defense systems that no intelligence report had documented. The Terra's Defiance became a sphere of intersecting death, its weapons tracking targets with inhuman precision, while the ship itself continued its evasive dance through the larger fleet formation. He destroyed 147 fighters in 12 minutes, Kythane said, consulting his tactical notes. How is such accuracy possible? The answer lay in another disturbing revelation from the wreckage analysis. The human ship's targeting systems weren't just advanced, they were learning. Each missed shot improved the next one's accuracy. Each successful kill refined the targeting algorithms. Captain Rand had turned his vessel into an adaptive killing machine that became deadlier with every moment of combat. But the fighter's destruction wasn't random slaughter. Analysis of the engagement patterns revealed a calculated psychological warfare campaign. Rand had specifically targeted wing leaders first, destroying the command structure and leaving the surviving pilots leaderless and panicked. Then he had picked off the most experienced veterans, those whose deaths would demoralize their squadrons. He wasn't just killing our pilots, Kythane realized. He was destroying our faith in our own superiority. The medical records painted a picture of warriors whose worldview had been systematically dismantled. The hegemony had built its military doctrine on the assumption of technological and tactical superiority over lesser species. Captain Rand had proven that assumption fatally flawed. "Show me the surrender attempts," Kythane ordered. Commander Jektal activated the communication logs, revealing the desperate final hours of the battle. As casualties mounted and formations collapsed, multiple hegemony commanders had attempted to negotiate with the human captain. Captain Rand, "This is Admiral Velthok of the Zephyrian Third Fleet," came the recorded transmission. "We acknowledge your tactical superiority. Withdraw now, and we will guarantee safe passage to human space." Rand's response had been broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring every surviving hegemony crew member heard his words. "You came here to execute me for the crime of defending my people. You brought 200 ships to kill one human. Now you want to negotiate?" His laughter was ice-cold fury. "The only guarantee I offer is this. Every ship that runs will be hunted down. Every crew that surrenders will be spaced. You wanted to see what humans do when cornered? This is what we do. We win." The recording continued with increasing desperation from hegemony commanders as their tactical situation deteriorated. Captain Rand had systematically destroyed their supply vessels first, leaving the battle fleet stranded without fuel or ammunition. Then he had targeted their medical ships, forcing them to watch their wounded die without aid. "Monstrous," whispered Sithara, but Kythane was beginning to understand the human captain's strategy. Not monstrous, practical. He knew he couldn't defeat 200 ships in conventional combat, so he changed the nature of the engagement itself. The battle's final phase showed Rand's ultimate tactical masterstroke. With half the hegemony fleet destroyed or disabled, He had used the wreckage as cover to approach the remaining command vessels. The Terra's defiance, now barely held together by emergency force fields and sheer determination, had positioned itself at the gravitational balance point between three dreadnoughts. He used his ship's drive core as a weapon, Jektal reported with professional admiration. The explosion created a cascading gravitational collapse that pulled all three dreadnoughts into mutual collision. The tactical display showed the horrific beauty of the maneuver. Three massive warships, each carrying thousands of crew members drawn together by the artificial gravity well of an overloading human drive core. The impact had been visible across multiple star systems, a brief new star that announced humanity's refusal to die quietly. "And Captain Ran?" Kithane asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Ejected in an escape pod moments before detonation, Vorthak reported weakly from his medical bed. "We found the pod's beacon in the debris field, but by the time we could mount a recovery operation..." He trailed off, his breathing apparatus cycling rapidly. "What happened to him?" Vorthak's compound. Eyes focused on the Admiral with effort. "Gone. The pod was empty except for a single message recorded on the emergency beacon. Would you like to hear it?" Kithane nodded, dreading but needing to know. Captain Mordecai Rand's voice filled the medical bay, calm and professional despite the circumstances. "To whoever finds this recording, my name is Captain Mordecai Rand of the Terran Defense Force. I have demonstrated to the Hegemony Council that humanity will not be bullied, conquered, or exterminated. We are willing to pay any price for our freedom. If you are wise, you will remember this lesson. If you are not, we will teach it again." The emergency session of the Hegemony High Council convened in the crystalline chambers of the Nexus Prime Station. Representatives from 17 species gathering to address what military intelligence was calling the human problem. Admiral Kithane stood before the assembled delegates, his report displayed in holographic detail above the chamber floor. "Honored counselors," he began, his translator rendering his words in the formal cadences required by protocol. "We face an unprecedented threat to hegemony stability. The destruction of Battlefleet Terminus represents more than a military defeat. It signals a fundamental shift in the balance of power within our sphere of influence." Counselor Vexithera of the Zephyrian Republic activated her speaking pod, her mechanical voice cutting through the chamber's atmosphere. "Admiral, you speak of a single human vessel destroying 200 of our finest warships. Surely the official reports contain errors in translation or data corruption." Kithane had anticipated this skepticism. "Honored counselor, I have personally reviewed all sensor logs, interviewed survivors, and analyzed wreckage from 47 different vessels. The facts are beyond dispute." He gestured to the holographic display, which showed a three-dimensional map of human space. "More disturbing than Captain Rand's tactical abilities is what our intelligence services have discovered in the aftermath." The entire engagement was broadcast live throughout the human colonial union, not just military commands, but civilian communication networks. Counselor Thisara of the Velthari warrior clans rose to her full height, her battle-scarred exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. "Impossible. No species would share detailed tactical information with their general population. It violates every principle of operational security. That assumption reveals our failure to understand human psychology," Kithane replied. "They didn't see it as intelligence sharing. They saw it as inspiration. Captain Rand's final transmission has been viewed over 2 billion times across human space. Children are memorizing his words. Their military academies are studying his tactics." The implications hung heavy in the chamber's recycled atmosphere. The Velthari counselors' mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "You're suggesting they're preparing for war." "Not preparing," Kithane corrected. "Already fighting. Our border monitoring stations have detected a massive mobilization throughout human space. Industrial output has increased by 300% in the past 2 months. They're building ships, weapons, and training new crews at a rate that defies economics logic." The holographic display shifted to show intelligence reports from across the human frontier, civilian vessels being retrofitted with military-grade systems, mining operations stripped bare to feed weapons manufacturing, even agricultural worlds converting food production facilities to munitions factories. They're transforming their entire civilization into a war machine, Kithane continued. But this isn't traditional military buildup. They're not constructing dreadnoughts or battle stations. Instead, they're mass-producing Captain Rand's design, fast, heavily armed cruisers designed for asymmetric warfare. Counselor Zethmore of the Hegemony Central Authority, the Chamber's most senior member, activated his speaking platform with visible reluctance. Admiral, what are your tactical recommendations? Immediate diplomatic contact, Kithane replied without hesitation. We need to open negotiations before this escalates beyond control. The humans have demonstrated they can inflict catastrophic damage even when outnumbered. If they attack in coordinated groups, unacceptable, interrupted Counselor Vexthara. The hegemony does not negotiate with inferior species. Our prestige across the galaxy depends on maintaining our position of strength, but Kithane had prepared for this objection as well. Counselor, with respect, our position of strength is an illusion that Captain Rand has already shattered. Intelligence. Reports indicate that at least 47 species are closely monitoring our response to the human situation. Several have already begun reducing their military cooperation with hegemony forces. The chamber erupted in cross-species discussion as the implications became clear. The hegemony's authority rested on the perception of invincibility. If minor species began to believe they could successfully resist hegemony expansion, the entire political structure could collapse within a generation. What makes you believe the humans would negotiate? Asked Counselor Zethmore. Kithane manipulated the holographic display to show recent human military movements. Because they're not positioning for conquest, they're preparing for defense. Every new ship they build, every system they fortify, follows a defensive doctrine. They don't want to rule the galaxy. They just want to be left alone. Then we leave them alone, suggested Counselor Thysera. Withdraw our forces from their borders, focus our expansion in other directions. Too late for that, Kithane replied grimly. Our intelligence services have intercepted human communications, discussing something called the Rand Doctrine. They believe the hegemony represents an existential threat that must be eliminated preemptively. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the full horror of their situation. The humans weren't just preparing to defend themselves. They were planning to strike first, using Captain Rand's tactics on a massive scale. How many ships could they field? Asked Counselor Zethmore. Kithane consulted his notes. Conservative estimates suggest 1,500 vessels within 6 months, but that's assuming conventional engagement parameters. If they employ Captain Rand's tactics, using their ships as guided weapons, accepting catastrophic losses to inflict maximum damage, they could effectively neutralize our entire fleet structure. The silence stretched longer as the Council grappled with an unprecedented crisis. The hegemony had never faced an enemy willing to accept total destruction in exchange for victory. Their military doctrine assumed that all species valued survival above ideology. There is another factor to consider, Kithane continued reluctantly. Captain Rand's final message mentioned that Earth had stopped asking for help. Our xenology departments have been studying human history, and the pattern is consistent. When their diplomacy fails, they don't surrender. They adapt. He gestured to a new display showing human historical conflicts. Every major war in their past has driven technological and tactical innovation. Each defeat has made them stronger, more determined, more creative in their approach to warfare. Captain Rand's sacrifice wasn't just revenge, it was education. The implications were staggering. The hegemony faced an enemy that learned from every engagement, adapted to every challenge, and grew stronger with each defeat. An enemy that had just learned exactly how to kill them. 6 months after the destruction of Battlefleet Terminus, Admiral Kithane stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed fortress station Hegemony's Will, watching long-range sensors track the approaching Human fleet. The intelligence estimates had been conservative. Nearly 2,000 vessels had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of hegemony space, their formation unlike anything in conventional military doctrine. "Status report," he commanded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Sir, the human fleet is maintaining position at maximum sensor range," reported Commander Jektal. "No aggressive maneuvers, no targeting locks, they're just waiting." The tactical display showed the enemy formation in detail. Instead of the traditional battle lines favored by hegemony forces, the human ships were arranged in loose clusters that seemed almost random. Yet Kithane's experienced eye could see the deadly intelligence behind the positioning. Each cluster could support the others while maintaining maximum maneuverability. "They've learned from Captain Rand's engagement," he observed. "No single point of failure, no predictable attack patterns." A priority signal chimed on his communication console. The Hegemony High Council had reached their decision regarding first contact protocols with the human fleet. "Admiral Kythane," came Counselor Zethmore's voice through the quantum entanglement communicator. "You are authorized to open diplomatic channels with the human commander. Terms of negotiation have been uploaded to your tactical system." Kythane reviewed the terms with growing dismay. The Council was offering the humans expanded territory, trade concessions, and recognition as a protected species under hegemony oversight. It was the same condescending approach that had led to this crisis in the first place. "Counselor," he replied carefully, "with respect, these terms may not be sufficient. The humans have demonstrated they're willing to accept total destruction, rather than submit to external authority. The terms are final, Admiral. If the humans reject our generous offer, you are authorized to demonstrate hegemony's strength through targeted military action." The connection terminated, leaving Kythane staring at the impossible tactical situation before him. The fortress station commanded the approaches to 3 major hegemony systems, its weapons arrays capable of destroying entire fleets. Yet he found himself doubting whether even their most advanced defenses could stop an enemy that fought like Captain Rand. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet," reported his communications officer. "It's addressed to you personally." The main display activated, revealing a human female in crisp military uniform. Her expression was composed, professional, but her eyes held the same unyielding determination Kythane had seen in Captain Rand's final recordings. "Admiral Kythane," she said, her translator rendering her words in perfect hegemony standard. "I am Fleet Admiral Cordelia Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. I believe you have a proposal for us." Kythane activated his own transmission system, acutely aware that this moment would determine the fate of both civilizations. "Admiral Vasquez, the Hegemony Council extends an offer of peaceful coexistence. We are prepared to recognize human territorial claims and establish mutually beneficial trade relationships." Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Admiral, I've studied the records of your previous peaceful coexistence agreements. 17 species have accepted similar terms over the past century. How many of them still maintain independent governments?" The question struck at the heart of hegemony expansion policy. Every protection agreement eventually led to political integration and military absorption. It was the fundamental strategy that had built their interstellar empire. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, Admiral," Kythane replied. "Species that cannot defend themselves require guidance from those with greater experience. Like Captain Mordecai, Rand required guidance." Vasquez's voice carried the edge of barely controlled fury. "Like the colony ships you destroyed at Kepler Station, like the diplomatic mission you spaced at Proxima." Kythane felt the conversation slipping beyond his control. The human admiral wasn't negotiating. She was delivering an indictment. "Admiral Vasquez, the past cannot be changed. We offer a future of cooperation between our peoples. You offer subjugation dressed as cooperation," she replied. "The same offer you made to the Zephyrians before you enslaved their homeworld. The same protection you extended to the Velthari before you turned them into your attack dogs. The accusation hung in space between the fleets. transmitted across dozens of star systems by quantum relay. The human admiral was broadcasting their conversation throughout both civilizations, ensuring that every citizen heard the truth about hegemony diplomacy. "What do you want?" Kythane asked, abandoning pretense. Vasquez leaned forward slightly, her image filling the display. Complete withdrawal of hegemony forces from human space, dissolution of all territorial claims beyond your original borders, recognition of the right of all species to self-determination without interference. "Impossible," Kythane replied immediately. "The Council would never accept such terms." "Then the Council has chosen war," Vasquez said simply. "Admiral Kythane, I want you to understand something before this begins. Captain Rand taught us that victory isn't about survival. It's about making the cost of conquest unacceptable. We didn't come here to defeat your empire. We came here to end it." The transmission cut off, leaving Kythane staring at empty space. Around him, the fortress station's combat systems began their automated startup sequences, responding to the obvious threat. 2,000 human warships against the hegemony's most heavily defended position. "Sir," reported Commander Jektal, his voice tight with stress. "The human fleet is moving. They're not approaching an attack formation, they're scattering." The tactical display showed the truth of his words. Instead of massing for assault, the human ships were spreading throughout the system, taking positions that made no tactical sense according to conventional doctrine. "What are they doing?" Kythane wondered aloud. His answer came in the form of synchronized explosions throughout the system as the human vessels detonated their own drive cores simultaneously. The cascade of gravitational distortions tore through local spacetime, creating an expanding zone of chaotic physics that no ship could survive. Admiral Vasquez's final transmission reached them as the fortress station began to break apart under impossible gravitational stresses. "Remember Mordecai Ran, Admiral. Remember that humanity doesn't ask for mercy. We give none." The silence that followed the destruction of the Nexus system was more profound than the vacuum of space itself. Across 17 worlds, hegemony citizens watch their communication. Networks display the same impossible truth. 2,000 human vessels had simultaneously sacrificed themselves to eliminate the Empire's most strategic military position. On the bridge of the hospital ship, Mercy's Grace, Admiral Kythane floated in a medical suspension pod, one of fewer than 300 survivors from a station that had housed 50,000. The nanite swarm keeping him alive hummed softly as he reviewed the aftermath reports through his neural interface. "Admiral," came the voice of his aide, Sub-Commander Felnari, who had somehow survived by being in the deepest sections of the fortress when it came apart. "The Hegemony Council is requesting immediate strategic assessment." Kythane accessed the communication link, his injuries making speech difficult. "Tell them the assessment is simple. We lost." The tactical data painted a picture of devastation beyond military comprehension. The human fleet hadn't just destroyed the Nexus system. They had created a permanent gravitational anomaly that would prevent any vessel from using the region's hyperspace routes for centuries. 3 major trade corridors had been severed, isolating entire sectors of hegemony space. "Sir, there's something else," Felnari continued hesitantly. "Intelligence reports from throughout our territory. The humans didn't just send one fleet. The full scope of human strategy began to unfold before Kythane's disbelieving consciousness. While Admiral Vasquez had drawn attention to the Nexus system, similar sacrificial attacks had occurred simultaneously across hegemony space. Every major military installation, every strategic choke point, every system that served as a cornerstone of imperial control, all had been targeted by human ships willing to die to achieve their objectives. "How many?" Kythane asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Preliminary estimates suggest 15,000 vessels," Felnari reported. "They struck 47 systems simultaneously. Our entire military infrastructure has been crippled." The magnitude of the coordinated assault defied comprehension. The humans had built their fleet not for conquest, but for mutual annihilation on an unprecedented scale. Every ship had been designed with a single purpose: to take critical hegemony assets with them when they died. Casualty reports? Kythane forced himself to ask. Catastrophic across all sectors. Military losses exceed 70% of our active fleet. Industrial capacity reduced by 80%. More critically, sir, the political structure is collapsing. Through his neural interface, Kythane accessed the priority communications flooding in from across hegemony space. Species that had served the Empire for generations were declaring independence. Worlds that had provided resources and troops were cutting off all cooperation. The carefully constructed hierarchy of fear and dependence that had held the Empire together was dissolving in the face of humanity's demonstration. They didn't just attack our ships, Kythane realized with growing horror. They attacked the idea of our invincibility. The reports continued to stream in, painting a picture of systematic collapse. The Velthari warrior clans had withdrawn from all hegemony military commitments, their war chiefs claiming that humans had shown the true face of battle, and that the Empire was unworthy of warrior service. The Zephyrian Republic was demanding immediate renegotiation of their subjugation treaties. Even the client species were beginning to refuse tribute payments. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth," Felnari announced. "It's being broadcast on all frequencies throughout hegemony space." The medical bay's display activated, showing a human male in simple civilian clothing, standing before what appeared to be a memorial wall. Behind him, thousands of names were etched in black stone, the crews who had sacrificed themselves in the coordinated attacks. "Citizens of the former hegemony," the man began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I am President Marcus Chen of the United Earth Government. I speak to you now not as a conqueror, but as a liberator." Kythane recognized the political masterstroke immediately. The humans weren't claiming victory. They were positioning themselves as the force that had freed the galaxy from hegemony oppression. "For too long your worlds have served an empire built on fear and subjugation," Chen continued. "Your resources, your children, your very identities have been sacrificed to feed an endless hunger for expansion. Today, that hunger ends. The display shifted to show images from across human space, massive reconstruction efforts, refugee camps welcoming species fleeing collapsed hegemony sectors, and most disturbing of all, human industrial capacity being rapidly converted from military to humanitarian production. "We do not seek to replace the hegemony with human rule," Chen declared. "We seek to ensure that no species will ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The galaxy belongs to all of us." The transmission included detailed proposals for a new interstellar organization based on voluntary association, rather than forced submission, trade agreements that benefited all parties equally, mutual defense pacts that protected smaller species without requiring them to surrender their independence. "They're rebuilding the galaxy in their image," Kythane whispered, finally understanding the full scope of human strategy, not through conquest but through example. The political implications were staggering. Every species that had chafed under hegemony rule now had an alternative model of interstellar relations. The humans were offering what the Empire never could: genuine partnership rather than subjugation. "Admiral," Felnari said quietly, "there's a personal message for you at the end of the transmission." President Chen's image was replaced by Admiral Vasquez, her uniform now bearing insignia that Kythane didn't recognize. Behind her stood a figure that made his heart skip a beat: Captain Mordecai Ran, alive and bearing the scars of his impossible escape from the Nexus battle. "Admiral Kythane," Vasquez said, her tone respectful but firm. "Captain Ran has asked me to extend an invitation. The Terran Defense Force is establishing a new military academy focused on ethical warfare and the protection of civilian populations. Your tactical expertise and intimate knowledge of hegemony systems would be invaluable in ensuring that future conflicts can be resolved with minimal loss of life." Rand stepped forward, his presence commanding even through the transmission. "Admiral, you showed honor in trying to negotiate rather than fight. That kind of wisdom will be needed in the galaxy we're building. The choice is yours. Remain with the ruins of the old order, or help us create something better. The transmission ended, leaving Kythane alone with the most important decision of his military career. Around him, the medical equipment monitoring. His recovery hummed with mechanical indifference, but his mind raced with possibilities. Through the hospital ship's viewports, he could see the remnants of the hegemony fleet limping toward the nearest habitable system. Ships designed for conquest now served as rescue vessels, their weapons systems stripped out to make room for refugees and medical supplies. The transformation was already beginning. "Sub-Commander," Kythane said finally, his voice stronger than it had been since the battle. "Signal our acceptance of the human offer, and prepare a full tactical analysis of hegemony defensive strategies. It's time to ensure that no other species has to learn what we learned about underestimating humanity." As the Mercy's Grace changed course toward Earth, Kythane reflected on the price of arrogance. The hegemony had sought to crush a single human captain, and had instead awakened a sleeping giant that redefined the very nature of interstellar warfare. They had learned too late that some species would rather die than kneel. But perhaps in the ruins of their empire, something better could be built. Something that honored Captain Rand's sacrifice not through revenge, but through the promise that no other species would face extinction for the crime of defending their freedom. The galaxy would remember the human way, not as conquerors, but as the species that chose to die rather than surrender their principles, and in dying, taught the universe what it truly meant to be free. In the end, they had sent an entire fleet after one human captain. Only one broken starship had returned in silence, carrying not news of victory, but the recognition that humanity had won the only war that truly mattered. The war for the right to exist on their own terms. The silence that followed would echo across the stars for generations, a reminder that some victories are measured not in territories conquered, but in the number of beings who wake up free.